All right. Hello, gang. Sorry for that delayed start. Had some technical issues. Forgive me. Some of you are wondering, how can you still be having technical issues after you've done about 1,500 broadcasts? All I can say is you would be surprised. All right, whew, good to be here. And I'm not doing my clapper till I figure out what to do about that, because I'm not doing, as you can tell, I'm not doing Daily Art Adventures anymore. I hate to call it Daily Art Adventure when I only do one every 2 weeks. Now, I expect to do more than one every 2 weeks, you understand. But at the moment, I'm pretty scarce until I get a routine down. I'm not going to call it Daily Art Adventure. Now, I called this broadcast Finishing Touches, and then after I gave it that name, as I was getting prepared and looking at my portrait, I went, oh man, I painted those hands. I didn't realize it. I had never carefully drawn the hands. I just sketched them in rough and proceeded to do some finished painting. Anyway, they're too big. I don't know if you can see that. That's like a man size. Look at that size. Anyway, and there is some camera distortion, but not that much. Anyway, so the first thing I have to do is redraw this hand, which in my book does not qualify as finishing touches. That's a little bit more than touches. So alas, my title is now quite misguided. Hello, Uncle. Good to see you, so to speak. Good to see your name. And I was just going to see would I be better off with my... Yeah, I think I am. I have one of the best investments I ever made in the arena of eyewear is from my optometrist. I got them to make me a pair of computer glasses that have the same prescription as the reading part of my bifocals, you know. So the whole thing is in focus. So I'd have to go like this, you know. That's those of us who wear bifocals, which is probably most of us over 60 or whatever. So I'd have to go like that. Does that make sense? All right, so I'm going to do some quick measuring. Boy, I'm rather disgusted with myself for not seeing this earlier. But there you go. Better to see it now than to let it go out the door and be really disgusted when it's all so supposedly all done. And then I discover that her hand is way too big. But still, it's a little embarrassing. It just comes from having too much to think about, right? Which is sort of that's the essence of portraiture, in my opinion. Actually, all painting is we have too much to think about all the time. So I never really looked critically at this hand, as you can tell, because it's way too big. So we're going to fix it again, which means that the name that I put on this broadcast is not very accurate. But while we're here, hello, Michael. Yeah, bifocals can be a pain when painting, can't they? Here, I'll take just a minute to zoom in to her face, get this out of the way. And you can see, well, my reference barely way up there. I'm quite happy with it. I feel like I've captured her twinkling smile. I might play with it a tiny bit more. The one thing that I'm not entirely happy with is the overall, the highlights or the lack thereof. Now, the reason there's a lack of highlights is because there are a lack of highlights in this photograph, and I believe that it's a caprice, a trick of photography. If I were looking at Tali in real time, in real life, my eye would see more variations in this flesh tone. As it is, it's quite flat, and my painting is quite flat. I've already tried to push the value, push the lights on her face, but as I look at it today with fresh eyes, I say, nah, I haven't pushed it quite enough. But that'll have to wait, because at the moment I have a hand to draw. So I really am disappointed that I'm not doing as advertised, that I'm not doing final touches. So again, for those of you who maybe are just joining late in this process, this is my granddaughter Tali. She just turned 6 a little while ago, and I did a painting of her big sister, Lake, when Lake was about the same age. So now the lines that I'm doing right now, of course, are way too dark. I'm just using the dark paint as essentially as a drawing tool. And using this divider measuring tool. You could use a ruler. We've talked about this before. Of course, you could use a ruler. I just find either the divider, or some of you have seen this. Whoops, I'm sorry. There we go. Sorry about that. You've seen this proportional divider, and this works perfectly fine. By the way, I put white tape on here to stiffen it up so it holds its position a little bit better. Actually, it's more than one layer of tape. And of course, you can do the same thing. And for what I'm doing right now, this would work perfectly fine. The advantage or the benefit of using the high quality, it's a really an antique tool now, isn't it? A drafting tool. But I'm old and an old draftsman, so I still have the old tools. But of course, these come to a razor sharp point, so you can get very precise, whereas these are literally a blunt tool. We use that term, we use that expression in an analogy. Often we talk about a blunt tool. But in this case, I'm being very literal. It's literally a blunt tool. And evidently, I'm having a hard time getting this hand reduced down to the actual size. In the photograph, dear little Tali, she was 6 at the time. And she still is 6, but I was trying to think, is she 5 or 6? No, I think she was 6. Anyway, she has dirty fingernails. And her mom will be glad to know that I'm not going to insist on being realistic at that point. Now, here's a little bit of instruction that might be helpful. One of the benefits of drawing in paint as opposed to drawing in pencil. There's benefits to drawing in pencil. I'll go over that in a minute. Now, this is, I say it all the time, Jumbo Jet Black distributed by Jerry's Autorama. And the president over there at Jerry's told me they actually because I said surely they come from China like everything else. He said no, they actually come from Austria. So I don't know if he was just, anyway, I have no reason to think he wasn't telling the truth. Okay, the squirrel. Please, can we find an art teacher around here that's not ADD? All right, one of the benefits of drawing with a brush is that you can move the paint around very easily, and in a sense erase with a clean or almost clean brush. So wiping it off with a rag, I just put a little bit of liquid, a little bit of brush cleaner, Gamsol on it, and using this trick, of course, it lets you smear the paint around and you end up with sort of a tone. It'll aid in the achieving of tone. So that's the benefit of one benefit of drawing with paint. Now, on the other hand, conversely, shall we say, the benefit of drawing with any kind of pencil is the whole painting is paint. Duh, right? Paint, 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 paint. So when you make a pencil line, the pencil line screams out loud. It says, I'm a different kind of line, right? So when you draw with this, you don't get confused about, like right now, I could be confused. Now, is this or that or this or that? Is this one of the old marks or one of the new marks? Do you know what I mean? You can get confused. At least I can. You can confuse yourself. Is that one of the new marks? Is that a correction, or is that one of the old marks? It's a mistake. Okay, so the pencil's good for that. So either way, I'm going to go ahead and start. I guess blocking might be a reasonable term. Blocking a little bit of flesh tone here because it's getting so messy. I'm having a hard time seeing what's what. Okay, the good news is I'm down to the correct size, so that's a relief. Here's another tip, I suppose. So as I'm having to paint some of the plate to carve off Tali's little thumb there. So the solution is I mixed up a particular color, blue in this case, to paint the plate. And the solution is don't just use that whatever color I've got on my brush right now, don't just do it right here, because then it'll be a dead giveaway that it's a patch job, a correction, right? But if I drag this same color that I just mixed up, I don't even have to match it terribly well. And as you can see, I'm, of course, I think I'm done with the fabric. It looks more fuzzy in my painting, and I'm really fine with that. It's actually cuter, in my opinion, than what she's actually just wearing I don't know, I'm not an expert at fabric, so I don't know what to call it, but a smoother fabric. And I've rendered it more fuzzy, and I thought about fixing it. No, I actually like it kind of fuzzy, so that was nice. Here's an interesting little detail. The chair up here is very strange looking to you. It has green and black and gray, and my family, Tali, all of her siblings, and her parents will all recognize that chair easily, because the chair actually does have chipped off. It was painted green, and then years ago somebody painted it black, and then the black paint is chipping off. It's very primitive. My daughter, Tali's mother, who's my daughter Alicia, who's very bright, and she kind of likes, I don't know, whatever fashion that is, I don't know, but she's rather fond of those chairs in their decrepit condition. It's one of those weird English words, isn't it? You would think it would be decrepit, ed, like in the state of being decrepit, but I think it's not. It's actually decrepit, it. Must be crazy learning the English language, all you dear people learning it as a second language. Okay, I'm just going to continue. By the way, since I say so often, I say one of my most oft repeated rules of painting is you get dark. If you want some part of your painting to be darker, you use transparent paint to get darker. And you use, of course, opaque paint to get lighter. That's the rule, but there's an exception. There are exceptions to every rule, and this is one of the exceptions, and I usually don't have the opportunity to say it at the time. In my opinion, the number one exception to that rule is when you're doing portraits and flesh tones. If you use that principle, get dark with transparency, you often find yourself overshooting the mark and making your darks too dark. It's too strong of a tool, if you will, for that rule. So you see me here breaking my rule because I'm using opaque paint to render the darker bits of her flesh right there. I think I'm going to leave that a hand. Now let's look at the other one, because I suspect the other one's too large as well. Let's double check. Oh no. And of course, this one, there's a red plastic cup in the photograph in front of her. In front of her hand, so I can barely see a finger, and it doesn't give me really any helpful details. So no, this hand is okay, so that's nice. So it's not too large. I know what I want. A little bit more reflection of the red bouncing up on these fingers here. The red placemat. That's same thing here. And my family will easily recognize the red placemats too. They're a regular part of our furnishings here at Grandma and Grandpa's house. They lived with us for 3.5 years and moved out just a month and a half ago. And they moved way too far away, so we're not very happy about that. They're doing the right thing, but we're not happy about it. We're doing okay, but we do miss them. We loved having them here. Absolutely. Absolutely loved it. 4 kids and their parents. All right, clearly I'm going to have to come back and do more on those hands later. A quick tip, for what it's worth, it's usually not a good idea to, especially in portraiture, to try to accomplish, if you can help it, don't paint, if you want to do realism in portraits, don't paint alla prima. I mean, that's a wonderful skill, and I wish I was more capable of doing it. I've done it. You can find a bunch of them on my website, on the portraits. I call them I think, fast oil portraits. I forced myself sometimes just to do it alla prima. But I'm not under that kind of pressure right now to do that. All right, so now I says to myself, let's go back up here to Tali's face. Let me move you guys. See, perhaps you can see a little bit better. Hang on. All right, I think if I leave you like that, put this up here. Oh, by the way, I think all that is finished. Just in case you're wondering, I might do a little bit more, but not much. All right. So there's my reference, and as you know, this is laminated with plastic so that I can test my colors on it. But what I'm doing right now, this matches this pretty well. This is a little bit too yellow. I don't know if you can see that on your monitor. So I've unyellowed it, taken some of the yellow out of this, and I like it. But I just find this a little bit flat, and I think I'm at a point where I can't trust the photograph. So I'm going to play a little bit dangerously here. Hey, let me see what you guys are saying here. Yes, Uncle, I could put a coffee cup in front of the little girl. Oh, that's a good idea. Should I take some off the sleeve, Uncle suggests. It's possible. It's possible. I think it's okay up here, but yeah, down here, it might be a good idea. Thanks. Mark Carter. Oh yeah, he has a proportional divider. Mark Carter does. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I've got a kind of a hodgepodge of. I didn't take time to mix up a bunch of flesh tones. I just have a little bit left over from just doing the hands right then. Again, forgive me, I'm going to straighten you out here in just a second. So I'm going to be painting partly from imagination or from my understanding of anatomy. By the way, so that's nice. What you just saw me do there, I'm zoomed in as far as possible, pretty much without picking up the camera. So I just put a stroke of paint right there, and probably you guys can't see it, which is good, because that means the color on my brush matches this perfectly. Well, I'll just say essentially perfectly. It didn't match that, right? Yeah, it matches that. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of pure titanium white to that pile that I just, and I'm going to almost imagine where there is, that's too light. I'm going to imagine where I think the highlights ought to be. I keep running into, okay, so this is, I'm going to call this good painting, which is to say, like you can tell, it's okay right here, but it's too light over here. So one way to fix that would be to blend this, to just take up a you know, a brush with almost no paint in it and just blend this edge. Whoops, hang on, sorry. Blend this edge. You can see that would be, according to Mark Carter and me, that would be bad painting. What's the alternative? Is you mix up the transition color and apply it and leave brush strokes, albeit quite subtle brush strokes, but brush strokes nonetheless. So instead of painting blendy, you paint mixy, to use the parallel term. Now, if you're doing a copy of, say, as I did years and years ago, of a William Bouguereau painting, then yes, you can blend some. If you do that, you end up with a glassy, smooth painting. And even though that has a certain charm to it, there's a greater charm, in my opinion, and the opinion of most good painters of the last 100 years, that a painting that allows the viewer to see human marks, that's the most reductionist way to put it. A painting that is both realistic and still has what I call human marks in it is more interesting than a painting that is glassy, smooth. And again, I'm by no means unusual in that opinion. I'm simply expressing really the standard view among painters of beauty in their work. So, back, I just mixed up. Oh, hang on, I have an errant hair. By the way, I don't usually say much about product, but I will go ahead and say that at least here in America, I find the Silver Brush Company, and this is their top of their line, Silver Grand Prix, that green handles with the copper ferrule, are the best brushes. Now I know, the name just went out of my mind. The other brush company, besides which there may be dozens of little boutique brush companies that I don't know about. I know that. But the Silver Brush Company Grand Prix is my favorite. All right, this is achieving. Let me talk for a minute. This would be a good opportunity. And forgive me, I know you guys, I wish you could probably hardly see what I'm doing, I'm afraid, because what I'm doing is so subtle, and of course that in itself is a lesson. Last year I did a total of 52 portraits. Some of you will remember that season when coronavirus hit. I scrambled, said, what am I going to do to make a living in this challenging season? I felt like offering to do portraits at dirt cheap prices was a good move, and it was a good move. So I ended up doing 52 portraits, including, and when I say portraits, I mean that's how many faces I did. If I did a painting with 2 faces in it, that's called 2 portraits. All you artists understand that. Some of you non-artists think, no, it's just 1 portrait. It must take a lot of work to fill up a canvas that big. I'm being silly. Getting paint on the canvas is not the work. It's getting the likeness. It's getting a finished face is what's the work. Anyway, so I did 52, not 52 separate paintings, but 52 portraits. Oh, I think that includes a couple dogs. That's questionable right there. I will admit that. But anyway, so yeah, that's good. This is working. I'm okay. I'm happy with this. As you can imagine, and here I am. I'm a pretty old professional artist. Been a professional artist pretty much my whole adult life, and I'm still learning, still striving very hard. And because I was working on portraits so hard last year, then I was also, studying. I didn't take classes, but I would watch other portrait painters online, mostly as I'd be flipping through my, Google on my phone, slipping through Google or YouTube, which of course is also Google. But anyway, an excellent portrait would catch my eye, and I would often, flip back, like, wait a minute, let's look at that again. And I've been trying, especially this year, really more than this year, but certainly this year, I've been trying to figure out, okay, so what is it? If I look at a portrait and go, dang, they're better than me. To me, I hope for you too, that is not a depressing, discovery. Hardly. That's really a good thing. I mean, a real rank beginner, believe it or not, can't even see. when this is one of the mysteries of all of life, including art. Let's pick on the typical pretty talented high school artist kid. Shows his painting proudly, as he or she should. And we're proud of them because they're only in high school. But many of them can't even see that their portrait or whatever falls far short of, the mature adult next to them. So part of, and not picking on anybody, just all of us, we get to the point we go, oh, wait a minute, mine's not as good as theirs, is it? So that's progress. Anyway, so I've been doing that a lot in this past year. Saying, wow, this person is better than I am. And that makes me stop, makes me scratch my chin and do some serious thinking and looking and trying to figure out, so what is it that they know that I don't know? What are they doing that I'm not doing yet? So that's been most of my study. And in this past year, one of the chief elements that I think I've discovered, why is this or that person better than me? What are they doing that's better? And the answer is often, I'm not going to say always, but very often, the person who's better than me, the artist who's better than I am, they're spending more time, more perception, their perception skills are better than mine, and they're seeing gradations in color and value. And really for me, I think it's not so much that they're seeing it, because after I see it, after I realize that, I go, oh, I can see that too. They're paying more attention, or they're responding more. Maybe responding more is a better word. So in the end, I will confirm this because I belong, at least till coronavirus hit. I was a part of the leader of our local monthly painters forum. And most of the painters there are not quite at my level, right? probably not a surprise. I'm not being a big shot. I'm just, you know, most of them are not full-time professional for 40 years, so of course. And when they put their portraits up, their portraits painting, I go, ooh, not enough attention. You're not noticing variations and gradations, if you will, of value. You're just getting kind of close to the right color and saying, oh, that's good enough. Now, by the way, I'm going to do some blending here. So that's my point, was not to pick on other people. I'm just using them as an example of, yeah, I think this is an area where I have needed to improve over the last year, over the last couple of years. And I'm happy to say I'm better than I used to be, right? That's good news, isn't it? Good news for me. Now, I have all kinds of other areas where I can improve. And frankly, all of my portraits, all the portraits I've ever done, I consider to be pretty much in the adolescence of my portrait career. In other words, I always expect to get better. Now, how long do I think I'm going to live? I don't know, but I think I'm going to get better. I'm not even to the point yet where I'm even concerned with like creativity in presentation or creativity in background. It's like, yeah, that'll come later. I'm not worried about that. I'm just at the point where I'm trying to achieve a perfect likeness. So there you go. So I ended up doing a lot more blending, and when I say blending, I don't mean brushy. I mean mixy. Let's come back to this side of her, now the highlights of her face now. So in the last several minutes, I have lifted up the highlights on her face, and she does look better to me. It's not quite as flat. Now the question is, can I lift the highlights even more? This is one of the things I do remember from my Bouguereau class that I took. No, I did not take a class from William Bouguereau. I'm not that old. But I did take a class, not from Frank Gavino, but from one of his proteges 20 years ago. And one of the things I remember from that is Frank Gavino would teach to do the highlights, the lightest lights on your portrait. I think, if my memory is right, he recommends 4 different times, 4 different painting sessions where you're painting wet into dry, that you hit or apply the lightest lights again. A technique that has been helpful to me over the years. By the way, I don't mind there being a little bit of mess, of course. Let me mention this. I mentioned this the other day when I was doing real subtle things to her eyes to make her, and her mouth, to make her smile a little more pronounced. When you're painting with great precision, being very, very careful about your placement of your marks and so forth, you have to be careful. Along with care in placement, you have to be careful that you don't slip into hard edges. It's a really easy mistake to make. And right there you saw a little bit of cheating, blending with a clean finger. So she's got a real faint edge on her chin right there. And I don't have it quite enough on her in the painting yet, so let's get that. And right now there's way too much of an edge. I don't know if you can see that. So I'm mixing up a slightly darker color so that I can blend that in but not by blending, but by mixing. All right, I guess that's today's lesson. And this is pure Mark Carder with a D. He does a very good job of teaching this principle. And once again, I know that with the resolution of the camera that I'm using and the resolution of this whatever screen, whatever object you're looking on, where I'm way overshooting the capability here. I know you guys can hardly see what I'm doing, and I do apologize for that. Makes for some pretty boring broadcasting, I know. One of the things I hear all the time when I deliver an original painting to a client, if they've seen it online, well, I take a good picture of it and send it, and then pretty much always when I show up with the real painting, they go, "Oh my goodness, it's so much better in real life." Of course, our magnificent eyeballs are capable of so much more. So once again, I'm chasing those portrait painters who are better than I am. By the way, and I've thought several times during this conversation, one of the, I want to be careful here not speak too, okay, I'm going to speak overly bluntly, okay? One of the chief hallmarks of immature portrait painting is absolute, well, first, hard edges and absolute glassy smooth, no brush strokes. And I say that partly because the internet, YouTube and the internet images, with the advent of the internet, we have been inundated with that kind of artwork. Okay, there's just an absolute plethora, landslide, volcano of hyper-realistic, they call it, and I don't despise the people, usually young people, who are doing that kind of thing, but just in case any of you are such, it's almost always young people. And that's okay. I think everybody should do, maybe you've heard me say this, but I think everybody should do a hyper-realistic, tight, accurate, hyper-realistic, no brush strokes painting, at least one in their life. Just get it out of your system, do it. All your friends will be impressed. But you see that edge right there? That's not going to stay there. I just am pushing the highlights, and I'll come back and blend that by mixing some colors. But that kind of hyper-realistic, smooth, no brush strokes, absolute photorealistic painting is impressive, but it is not good. It's a hallmark of adolescent art making. And I know, because I did it. I wore one once. And some people never grow out of that. That's okay. Maybe that's their true, authentic calling. Maybe that's who they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to be. I think I would have paid attention. I wish I'd had a college professor who had sat down and said, "Dan, that stuff that you do, I didn't do much of it in college at all, but they could see that I had the propensity for doing that. And it wasn't enough just to say, no, we want to see brushstrokes. No. So that's why I don't usually use such simplistic language. I want to explain why. Why do we want to see brushstrokes? And again, I used to use the word, like everybody else does, loose painting, and I don't use that term anymore because that conveys completely the wrong impression to a beginner painter, what I usually call an early journey painter. The issue is not loose, the issue is energy. Manifestly human marks, manifestly human-made marks. It's a better way to put it. Because we like to see human marks in our paintings because it gives us, the viewer, gives us the impression that somebody, a creature like me, with a body and a soul and eyes and so on, much like myself, made this painting. And I can tell because they left their marks, which is not precisely what you don't get on one of those glassy smooth. And again, forgive me, because I know with the technology we're using right now, you guys probably can't see the marks that I'm leaving. So forgive me, you're just gonna have to trust me. Oops, it's too dark. Now I'm asking myself, have I gotten it too light? Does she look pale and washed out now? Which is very possible. I will tell you that if I decide, in fact, that I have made her washed out, I'm quite okay with that, because I have this is a Dan Nelsonism. I have a favorite trick up my sleeve, and that is I'll come and do yet one more session on, I keep thinking I'm done with this portrait, right? By the way, I'm not being paid, of course, a penny for this. I'm doing it because of love for my granddaughter, duh. But more than that, I'm doing it because with every portrait I get better, and I really want to get better. Anyway, the trick up my sleeve is glaze. So I will wait till this is dry, so tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. And then because it's so late in the painting process, I probably will not use Liquin, which is a very fast drying process. I will use, I'm trying to see if I've got a bottle of it right here. I think I do. The strangely named, Neil McGilp, which, surprise to me, is categorized as a fast dry medium, but it's very slow for me because I'm comparing it to Liquin. Hey, Uncle. Hot chocolate money. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Did I finish my last thought? Which was, oh yeah, so if I find she's slightly washed out with the Neil McGilp, so a slow dry medium, slow for me, I can do the most subtle glaze. I mean, so subtle. But in my opinion, finishing with a glaze is actually, if I have a trick up my sleeve when it comes to flesh tones, that's it. I could say, in fact, always finish a portrait with the flesh tones with a faint glaze. I don't usually say that, but that would be a decent rule. I need to show you one other trick before we go today, and I'm going to wrap this up pretty quickly. I learned this from Daniel Green, the one portrait class I took with him about 10 years ago. A fuzzy brush, a mop, very soft. Make sure it's clean and dry. Make sure it doesn't have any dried paint in it. And it's good for diminishing brush strokes. Now, I know this looks like Well, aren't you undoing the very thing that you're talking about? The answer is no, I don't. It sounds like a contradiction. Man, I don't know how to say it. There's some brush strokes that are pleasant, some that are not. And like the light here is right up straight above, and of course when this hangs in somebody's home for 100 years, most of the time the light will be over. And if you apply a brush stroke this way, of course there'll be little grooves, right? Imagine, magnified. And those grooves will catch light and cause a little glare and really a distortion of the color on the face because of the strokes. So that's the kind of thing this is what Daniel Green used. It just clips off the tops of the grooves so that it doesn't catch bad light. That's a sure matter of taste. Just for what it's worth, I'll show you how I typically clean a brush like this. When I've done that, I just take a good, in this case, terry cloth rag and just rub the heck out of it. Just rub. Rather than if I get a lot of paint on it, I'll dip it in Gamsol and clean it. But I find most of the time I'm going to do it again on my more or less clean apron. Okay. Thank you, Uncle, for that mop. That's one of your gifts to me last Christmas a year ago. Still using it. Appreciate that. By the way, I have ended up doing quite a bit, isn't this the way it goes? Quite a bit more painting on this portrait than I had anticipated while I've been talking to you guys. But I am having fun. That's the most important thing, isn't it? Isn't that the most important thing here? I've got a little mess down here on her chin. It's a little bit too much, so I'm using a damp, clean brush to clean it up a little bit. And a rag. And I don't know if you can tell, but I am actually leaving that. I haven't mentioned this today. I mention it often, but this is worth saying. In the photograph here, the edge is fairly razor sharp. Now, here, let me pick you guys up for a minute. Hang on. And because it's not actually razor sharp, you know, this is a print. Can you see? Yeah, you see how sharp it is in the photograph? It's pretty sharp, but compare that to my painting and how fuzzy the edge is on my painting. Do you see that? And even messy. There's even a little bit of, you know, sort of like spastic, inexplicable, not accurate, that is to say, not photographically accurate marks in the painting. And yes, absolutely, that is intentional. Certainly the softness, but even some of the irregularity in the edge of her cheek is intentional. And again, that's where the what I called earlier the adolescent portrait painter will not understand that. I mean, there's so many, as you know, there's so many aspects, so many respects in which the compliment, and I don't blame non-artists for saying this. They're non-artists. They're not supposed to know what I know. But they say, oh, it looks just like a photograph. Right. And I thank them. I don't usually give them a lecture, but I'll give you guys a lecture, my fellow artists. You know, there's so many respects, so many aspects where this is definitely not just like a photograph. Once again, I think everybody, and if you're an adult painter and you haven't done your one hyper-realistic painting yet, then come on, get on with it. This coronavirus craziness season is still with us. I can't believe it. It's a good season while you're all cooped up. Take some time, cheat like hell, cheat like crazy, project, trace, outline, do whatever you want to do, you know. Oh, let me leave her for a minute. There's a little bit I want to do in her hair before I finish this session. And I can already tell, just looking at this painting, I can already tell that I'm going to have at least one more session in it. Here's where I'm not really doing this for money. I do have a couple little commissions coming up. But here's one advantage is I'm going to work on this, my granddaughter Tolly, because my main objective, besides to do a lovely painting that hopefully she and her descendants will hang in their house for generations to come. Besides that, my number one objective is to get better at portrait painting. So I don't mind taking a little bit of extra time. So I called today's broadcast, clearly, erroneously, optimistically. My optimism has been dashed onto walks of reality. I called it finishing touches, and lo and behold, it's not finishing. What am I going to call the next broadcast? Maybe I'll just finish it without your company. How about that? But no, maybe I will. As long as I'm doing something interesting, I like to be able to broadcast and talk to you guys. Part of the reason I do this, and I think I've mentioned this, but not lately, why do I broadcast all the time? You've heard the old adage, I think that's an appropriate term for this, that the teacher learns more. You learn best by teaching. You know, the teacher learns most, and there's definitely an element of truth to that here. When I'm doing these broadcasts, as you can tell, besides my goofy hat, I have my teaching hat on. I'm thinking like a teacher, and that's comes very naturally to me, and I'm comfortable. But it really forces me to keep my wits about me, because I'm remembering these many concepts and principles that I might, if I'm not talking to you guys, I'd be playing a podcast or YouTube with history, science, theology, philosophy, culture. I'd be listening to some intense thing. And I have made the mistake a couple times of getting so engrossed in what I'm listening to that I paint poorly. I bog down and paint too slow because I'm distracted. Now everybody is telling us, have you heard this yet, by the way, that we only thought we can do two things at once? Multitasking, we called it, you know, and it was all the rage. Now all the experts are saying, no, there's no such thing. I don't know. There's certainly a degree of truth. We think we're getting more done, but we're actually, like me, talking to you guys and painting at the same time. All right, I'm going to call it quits because I'm in danger of overdoing it and losing my spark. So, yeah, and I still want to look at it one more time, at least with fresh eyes. And I got that hand fixed. That was a major correction. You get to see the bed in the corner of my studio. That's a long story. No, I don't actually paint in somebody's bedroom. Quite the other way around. We've had so many people living with us that we have an inflatable mattress in my studio. Anyway, let me go back and catch up with all your Wonderful comments. I'm glad to be back in the saddle. I really am. Thank you guys for watching. My uncle was asking a good question. What's the white scuttle? That's actually a fire. This is she's sitting in a kitchen, a breakfast nook, if you will, and there's a den back here and a fireplace. So this is just above the fireplace, and this is the mantle. I think I might clean. There's a line right there that I don't like. Goes at the wrong angle. I'll change that, but I'm going to leave that just about that abstract. And maybe the fact that you're asking gives me a hint that I should mess with that a little bit. Yeah, Michael, I'd love to hear your Gaelic. Michael, we have another friend in Scotland who has a male name, but it's really a woman watching. That's what we're talking about there. Oh, good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, good. Uncle's giving us some brush stuff. Princeton makes a great 3/4, 1 inch, 1/4 inch blender strokes. Thank you. Always love product recommendations. Thank you, Uncle. Princeton. I know the name, of course, and I'm sure I bought them. I'm trying to remember what color are they. Never mind, I probably have some here even. Is this a Princeton? Is it the beige tan colored? Now I'm all curious. Never mind, I won't waste any of your time. I buy all kinds of brushes because I'm always wanting. By the way, one of the things I don't like is snobbery. And one of the things I don't like about taking classes is the teacher telling all the students that they have to buy the latest, greatest, best, most expensive paint and brushes and so on. Apron, you have to have the best apron. I don't like that kind of thing. Sometimes I buy cheap brushes, Pro Stroke, Jerry's, store brand, where you can buy 10 brushes for $10, just about $15, Nothing wrong with using a cheap brush. It's just you have to treat it like a cheap brush, that's all. Well, of course, and as you guys know, my brushes I use the most are the absolute cheapest brushes in the world, the chip brushes. But I don't go for the snobbery thing that if you want to be a really good painter, you have to spend a lot of money buying fancy schmancy stuff. All right, come on, thing. All right. My screen's frozen. Oh boy. Tell you what, let's turn the live chat back on and let's see if there we go. Oh, the Princeton Select series. Good. Thank you. Yeah, what's the point of realism when you take a photo? That's a good question, and there actually is, because this is kind of the counterbalance to what I said about when I'm ragging on hyperrealism. Here's what I think the art professors in the last 100 years. I have here a whole stack, by the way. This is some of my, hang on, let me move it. Oh, come on. Some of my bibliography for my book that I've been writing for 15 years on modern art. All these guys right here. Well, not all of them, but most of them. Greenberg, that's one of the big names. Clive Bell, one of the big names, and so on. Those guys, those grumpy, they really were grumpy art critics of the 20th century. What they don't like to admit, what they won't admit, is that really all of us, except those who've drunk the Kool-Aid and trained themselves to be grumpy. All normal human beings, we get a kick. We really do. Admit it, kind of admit it, get over it, admit it. We get a kick out of seeing something realistic, hyper-realistic, outrageously well rendered by a fellow human being. Like to look at it and actually think it's a photograph and then discover that somebody drew it. So I'm saying something good about all that stuff that we see on the internet. There is something. Human beings get a kick. We're impressed by the time, patience, skill, industry, hard work, detail, patience. We're impressed. The best word to me is industry. We're impressed with the industry of another human being who will take all the time to do that. We really are. And I feel like that's, file that away. That's good. And that's why everybody should do one. Your friends some of your friends, that'll be the only painting of yours they like. As you know, I talk about it all the time, I think we're supposed to grow beyond that because there is something way more powerful than hyper-realism. But yes, there is value to something photorealistically rendered. We're impressed. And it's worth being impressed by. Does that make sense? So I just want to be really fair and honest about that. And of course, that's what most people are going to see, right? It's only us weird artists, who will look at this and see any of the subtlety in it. All of our non-artist friends will go, golly, it's just like a photograph. Right, okay, got it, right? That's what's going to impress most of my friends. And if I were a better painter, like doing this is at a certain level of skill, I ain't no John Singer Sargent, right? Or Zorn, Anders Zorn, Z-O-R-N, contemporary. People use my name and John Singer Sargent's name in the same sentence all the time. He sure ain't no John Singer Sargent, right? That's the sentence. And I ain't. I've talked in the past about taking a portrait like, I don't think I'll do it to this one, but about taking a portrait like this and sargentizing it after I'm satisfied with the precision. Actually literally go in and slap energy into it. It's a little bit artificial. That's not how Sargent did it. He actually did it that way from the beginning. But anyway, I'll let it go at that. All right. Thanks, gang. Fun to be with you. Thanks for jumping in, old friends. Thanks for the $15 hot chocolate tip. You guys are probably really cold up there, aren't you? Actually, Houston got hit worse than we did. Isn't that funny? All right. If I do anything interesting, I'll bring